I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, spilling my guts about something so raw and ugly, but here I am. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of pretending everything was perfect. We had the usual routine: mornings with coffee, weekends at the lake, quiet nights watching TV. I thought we had something real, something that lasts. Turns out I was just fooling myself. It all started last week when I decided to do a little spring cleaning in the closet. Nothing unusual, just pulling out some old boxes, reminiscing about the past. That's when I noticed the small, crumpled napkin shoved behind the back of a shelf. No big deal, right? I reached for it, and that's when I saw the lipstick stain. Bright red, unmistakably fresh. My stomach dropped. My mind spun. I froze, holding the napkin in my hand, feeling the sweat gather at my temples. I pulled out the box, trying to shake it off as some weird coincidence, but my heart hammered. The more I looked around, the more I found. A pair of used condoms in the trash can, half empty. A receipt from a hotel in town. All signs pointing to something more than just a careless fling. My mind raced. This can't be happening. Not my wife, not after all these years. I stayed silent for days, pretending everything was normal, but I could feel the poison creeping in. My stomach churned every time I saw her smile, her laugh. I kept asking myself, how could I have missed the signs? Was I ever really loved, or was I just useful, used? That thought haunted me, gnawing at my insides. I had to know the truth. I had to confront her. One quiet evening, I asked her to sit down. Her face was calm, almost too calm. "There's something I need to ask," I said, voice trembling. "Did you cheat on me before our wedding with my best friend?" Her eyes flickered. She hesitated just long enough to confirm everything. "Yes," she whispered, voice trembling. "I did." The world tilted. My knees went weak, and I clutched the edge of the table to stop myself from falling over. My hands, sweaty and trembling, clenched into fists. My mind raced. How the hell do I even process this? I can't believe the woman I married, the woman I trusted, not only cheated but did it right in front of me with someone I called my brother. That moment, I swear, everything changed. I felt this surge of rage, frustration, betrayal. I wanted to scream, to tear her apart, but instead I just sat there, silent, staring. She looked at me, tears welling up, and said, "I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." Sorry doesn't cut it. Sorry doesn't undo what's been done. Sorry doesn't fill the void of 5 years flushed down the drain. I clenched my jaw so tight my teeth ached. That's when I decided I couldn't let this go. I had to do something. Something that would finally make her understand how much she'd messed up. In the days that followed, I started piecing together a plan. I didn't want a messy divorce or some petty revenge that would blow up in my face. I wanted her to feel the pain, the same confusion I felt. I wanted her to know I wasn't some pushover who'd forgive and forget. No, I was going to make her regret every second she ever looked me in the eye and lied. I spent hours online, researching ways to get back at someone without crossing the line, just enough to make her realize what she lost. I ordered some cameras, sneaky little devices I could hide around her phone and apartment. I wanted her to see the truth in her own words, recorded for her to remember. My plan was simple but effective. Let her see her own betrayal from her perspective. I also made sure to keep my composure when I talked to her. I told her I needed space, that I needed to think. When she begged me to stay and work things out, I just nodded. Inside, I was already planning the next move. I wanted her to think she still had a chance, but I was 2 steps ahead. I was done being naive. One night, I sat in the dark, listening to her breathing across the room. My palms were slick. I felt the familiar burning in my chest, the desire to make her pay. Not with violence, but with something smarter, something colder. I finally understood that if I wanted to hurt her, I had to make her see the truth, her own lies, her own betrayal, all laid bare. That's when I knew I was ready. The game was on. The plan wasn't complicated, but it was calculated. I knew I had to be patient, so I waited until I was sure she was completely unaware. Over the next few days, I set up the tiny cameras I ordered, nothing big, just small enough to hide in everyday objects. One went into her purse, another inside her jewelry box, and a third under her living room table. I didn't want her to suspect a thing. I just wanted to watch, listen, and gather enough evidence to make her regret everything she'd done. I also installed a few keyloggers on her phone and laptop. I wasn't naive enough to believe she'd just slip up, but I knew she'd slip somehow. The little recordings and messages would be her own undoing. I spent hours watching her, the way she moved, her little lies, her fake smiles. It was like watching a stranger, but one I used to love. The betrayal was so thick I could feel it in my chest, making my stomach turn. One night I caught her late at night on the phone. Her voice was soft, conspiratorial. I listened as she whispered into her device, and I could see her in the camera's tiny frame, her face illuminated by the glow of her screen. I heard her talk about meeting her friend again, how she was planning to sneak out while I was asleep. That's when I knew I had enough. I wanted to confront her, but not then. I needed her to keep talking, keep revealing herself. So I kept quiet, watching her every move. The next morning, she left her phone on the kitchen counter and I saw everything. The messages, the plans to meet, the perfect little lie she was weaving. I felt my jaw clench so tight I thought I'd crack my teeth. That evening she returned home, completely oblivious. I sat on the sofa pretending to watch TV, but inside I was boiling. When she came in, she looked tired but smiled at me. "Hey honey, long day." I looked at her, feeling nothing but cold fire. "Yeah, long day," I said, voice even. "Just watching a movie. Want some popcorn?" She nodded and sat beside me, reaching for the remote. I could see her trying to act normal, but I knew better. I knew everything. Every secret she thought was hidden. In that moment I decided I wasn't going to let her walk away without consequences. Later that night I sat her down again. This time I played the recordings I'd made, her voice, her words, her lies. Her face drained of color as she listened. She tried to deny, to make excuses, but I cut her off. "You lied to me for 5 years," I said, voice cold but steadier than I felt. "You betrayed me with my best friend. I have everything on tape, every message, every call." Her eyes widened and she stammered. "It's not what it looks like. I was just confused. It meant nothing." "Nothing?" I scoffed. "Nothing doesn't include a hotel receipt and a condom wrapper in the trash. That's not confusion. That's betrayal." She looked like she wanted to cry, but I didn't care. I was already planning what to do next. That's when I realized I could make her regret every second of this. I had her exactly where I wanted. The truth was out and she had no way to spin her way out of it. I told her I was done, that I was filing for divorce and taking everything I deserved. The house, the money, the dignity, and I meant it. She begged, of course. Said she'd do anything to fix this, but I knew better. Trust was shattered. There was no saving what was already broken. In the quiet aftermath, I started to formulate my revenge. Not some childish game, but something smarter. Something she'd never see coming. I'd wait just enough to let her think she's still in control, then I'd strike in a way that would leave her reeling. She'd see her own reflection and realize she'd lost everything: the man she claimed to love, her reputation, her peace of mind. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all settle into my bones. I'd been naive once, thinking love could fix everything. Turns out love was just a mask she wore. From here on, it's game on, and I'm not going to lose. Not again. The next step was clear. I had to make her see herself for what she really was. I couldn't just confront her with the evidence and hope she'd break down. I needed her to feel the full weight of her betrayal. That's when I finalized my plan, one that would make her confront her own guilt, her own lies, without me ever needing to lift a finger directly. I waited a few days, letting the silence stretch between us. She was walking on eggshells, nervous but still trying to act like everything was normal. That was perfect. It kept her from suspecting anything was coming. I kept my calm, keeping her close enough for my plan to work but distant enough to let her feel the uncertainty. One night, I slipped out quietly after she fell asleep. I'd already hidden the keylogger in her phone case, and now I inserted a new, small device behind her bedroom mirror, one that could record her conversations without her noticing. I wanted her to talk freely, to admit everything when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I set the device to activate at a specific time, then retreated into the darkness. The following morning, I acted casual, but inside I was counting the minutes until I could review the recordings. I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, part anticipation, part anger. That was when she started talking in her sleep. I caught snippets of her murmuring about her plans, her guilt, her lies. She called her lover the mistake, and her voice cracked when she admitted how much she hated herself for everything. I took a deep breath and listened, every word like a knife twisting in my gut. It was more than I needed. She had no idea I was recording her. I kept calm and collected, knowing I had her exactly where I wanted her. The evidence was there, loud and clear, for her to hear herself. That night, I sat her down again. I played the recordings, letting her hear herself in her own words. Her face went white as the images and voices filled the room. She begged for forgiveness, said she'd do anything to take it back, but I wasn't buying it, not anymore. I looked straight into her eyes and said, "You lied to me for 5 years. You told me you loved me, but your actions say otherwise. I have everything on tape. Your own voice, your own confession." She burst into tears, but I held my ground. "You thought you could get away with this. You thought I'd never find out, but I did. And now I need to decide what to do about it." I told her I was done playing nice, that I'd give her one chance to come clean completely, no more secrets, no more lies. She looked at me with tear-streaked cheeks pleading, but I knew her game. She thought I'd forgive her, maybe even stay. That's not how this would go. The revenge I'd planned wasn't about petty revenge anymore. It was about her realizing she'd lost everything because she thought she could cheat, lie, and walk away. I was going to make her see that betrayal comes with a price, that her actions would come back to haunt her. I handed her a folder with all the recordings, the receipts, the messages. "Here, what I have. You want to keep pretending, keep lying, that's your choice. But I'm done. I'm leaving, and I want you to think about everything you've done. Because from now on, your life is about dealing with what you created." She looked at me, trembling, but I made sure she understood I wasn't playing anymore. The look in her eyes told me she knew I had her trapped, that she'd crossed a line she couldn't come back from, and I was just getting started. Waiting for her to decide her next move was almost worse than what I'd already done. I could feel the weight of my plan settling in. I'd make her regret every second, every lie. And when it was all over, she'd see that even the strongest betrayal can be turned into a lesson, one she'd never forget. The days that followed were the quiet before the storm. I kept everything under wraps, watching her carefully, making sure she didn't slip back into her old habits. Meanwhile, I was fine-tuning my plan, adding small touches that would make her feel the full weight of her betrayal without me ever needing to scream or shout. I wanted her to see the consequences, in her own reflection, in her own mind. I made a point of acting normal around her, but inside I was calculating every move. I spent hours carefully crafting the final part of my revenge, an act that would hit her where it hurt most, and make her realize she'd lost the trust of not just me, but herself. One evening she came home late. I could tell she'd been drinking, her voice was slurred, her movements unsteady. She was trying to act innocent, but I saw the guilt in her eyes. She sat on the sofa trying to smile, but I didn't buy it. I knew what she'd been up to, and I was ready to unload. I pulled out a small envelope from my pocket, something I had prepared earlier. Inside was a letter, a simple note I had written, but it carried all the weight of my anger and disappointment. I handed it to her silently, watching her read the words. "You betrayed everything we had. You lied, cheated, and used my trust as if it was nothing. This is your reminder of what you lost." Her eyes flickered with panic. She looked at me, trembling, trying to say something, but I interrupted her. "No more excuses. No more apologies. You're about to see what your betrayal truly costs." Then I pressed play on my phone, which I had already prepared with a series of recordings, proof of her lies, her plans, her secret meetings. The audio played softly, her voice, her words, her assurances to him that she loved me, all while she was planning her escape. Her face twisted with shock and shame as she heard herself, her breath hitched and her hands trembled as she listened. I saw her eyes fill with tears, but I didn't stop. I wanted her to realize she'd been caught in her own web. "You thought you could do this and I'd never know," I said coldly. "You thought I'd never find out, but I have everything, all your lies, all your secrets, and I'm not going to let this slide." She looked at me, desperate, trying to clutch onto some shred of hope. "Please," she begged, voice cracking. I was confused. "I didn't mean for it to happen, just give me a chance." There was a long silence. I felt the fire inside me burning hotter, but I kept my voice steady. You had your chance, you threw it away. This isn't a mistake you can fix with a sorry. It's a betrayal that changes everything. That night, I sat alone in the dark, feeling the weight of the final piece of my plan. I'd made her see herself, her lies, her betrayal, her failures. I wanted her to understand she lost her husband because she thought she could cheat her way out of her own guilt. That was the truth I was about to make undeniable. With everything in place, I knew the next step would be the most decisive. I'd give her one last night to see what she'd done and face the consequences. After that, it was over. No more excuses, no more hiding, just a clear, brutal truth, a truth I'd make her remember forever. That final night was set. I stayed up late, watching her from the shadows, the glow of the screen casting a faint light on her face. She was restless, packing around the apartment, her mind clearly racing. I could feel the anticipation building like the calm before a storm. I knew she was starting to realize that her world was about to completely unravel. At exactly midnight, I knocked on her bedroom door. She looked up startled, her eyes wide with confusion. "What's going on?" she asked, voice trembling. I didn't say a word. Instead, I handed her a small envelope. She opened it cautiously, pulling out a printed sheet. Her eyes widened as she read the words. "It's over. You've betrayed everything. Your lies, your secrets, your love, everything's exposed." As she stared at the paper, I pressed play on my phone again. This time I played the entire sequence of her confessing her affair, the plans she'd made, her own voice confessing her guilt. It was loud, unedited, and unmistakable. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face, helpless in her own betrayal. "Do you get it now?" I asked, voice hard and cold. "You've been caught, not just by me, but by yourself. You thought you could do this, go behind my back, and I'd never find out. But I did. And I want you to understand what that means." She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "Please, I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lost, confused. I didn't want to hurt you." "Save it," I snapped. "You did. You hurt me and you hurt yourself. You lost my trust and there's no coming back from that. I can't do this anymore." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the divorce papers I'd prepared earlier. I didn't hand them to her right away. Instead, I just looked at her, broken, crying, defeated. "Tomorrow I'll leave this place, and you'll wake up alone knowing you threw away 5 years for a moment's pleasure." She looked at the papers, trembling as if they were a death sentence. "You're really serious?" "Dead serious," I said, voice steely. "This is the end of us. I won't stay around and watch you destroy what little integrity you had left. You lied, cheated, and betrayed everything I believed in. I hope it was worth it." She collapsed onto the bed, sobbing, begging, pleading for me to stay. But I knew I couldn't, not anymore. I'd already made my decision, the only one that made sense. I handed her the papers, her shaking hands clutching them like a lifeline. "This is final," I said. "Sign it and it's over. No second chances, no regrets, just the truth." She looked at me one last time, tears blurring her vision. "You're really leaving?" "Yes, and I won't look back." I left her there, noise echoing in my ears, the sound of her crying, her whispered apologies. I didn't turn back. I walked out, closing the door behind me, feeling the heavy weight of what I'd done. In that moment, I knew I'd taken back control. I'd done what I needed to do to end the chaos, to reclaim my dignity. That's when I firmly believed that sometimes the only way to heal is to cut the poison out. And I was done letting her poison my life. The morning after I handed her the papers, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The house was quiet, perhaps too quiet, like it hadn't yet registered the finality of what had happened. I packed a bag, took a deep breath, and walked out the door without looking back. The keys, the house, the life I thought I knew, everything was gone. I handed over the keys, signed the papers, and watched her sign her name with trembling hands. It felt like a clean break, but the ache in my chest told me it would take longer than just a signature to heal. As I drove away from that place, I felt the weight lift, but also a hollow ache I couldn't ignore. For years, I'd believed in that marriage, in her love. Turns out, it was built on lies and betrayal. I kept replaying the scenes, the evidence, the moments I'd caught her in her own lies. A part of me wondered if I'd ever truly loved her or if I'd just been used all along. In the silence of the car, I finally let myself breathe. I realized that I had been living in a dream, one that she shattered with her own hands. But now I was free. Free to rebuild, free to find something real, something that didn't come with a lie attached. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the right thing. Looking back, I understand now that trust is fragile. Once broken, it's nearly impossible to fix. But I also learned that sometimes you have to burn everything down to start over. That's what I did. I turned her betrayal into a lesson, one I'll carry for the rest of my life. I won't pretend I feel absolutely nothing. There's a deep scar, a wound that will probably never fully heal. But I also feel a strange sense of strength. I took control, faced the truth, and walked away with my dignity intact. She might have thought she could cheat and lie her way out of it, but I proved her wrong. She lost a man who valued himself enough to walk away from her lies. Now I focus on myself. I find comfort in the quiet, in the freedom from her deception. I don't know what's next, and honestly, I don't care. What I do know is that I won't let anyone betray me like that again. I've learned that sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away and never looking back. And that's exactly what I did.